Now, President Trump's claim of executive privilege over the full Mueller report and its underlying documents earlier today set off some fireworks between the White House and the House Judiciary Chair.
Chairman Nadler is asking the Attorney General of the United States to break the law and commit a crime by releasing information that he knows he has no legal authority to have.
We've talked for a long time about approaching a constitutional crisis. We are now in it. They are stonewalling the American people from all information. It is an attack on the essence of our democracy.
Now, for anyone looking for adults in this back and forth, don't look to Jerry Nadler. This is not a constitutional crisis. It's not an attack on the essence of our democracy. This is the executive branch and the legislative branch flexing their muscles in ways that are, well, that has happened over decades and longer than that. And it's a constitutional exercise. Well, if you know Constitution 101, you can see through this. Joining me now, two people know more than that. John Yoo, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, and Sol Wisenberg, former Whitewater Deputy Independent Counsel, Fox News contributor. John, I want to start with you. Now, Democrats love to call the president's language reckless. But what about what we just heard from Nadler, calling what happened today, the last few days, a constitutional crisis, John?
Well, Laura, as you suggest, it's not a crisis. It might be a confrontation. But as you rightly point out, this is the way the framers designed the Constitution to work. They gave Congress some powers, the right to conduct hearings and oversight, but they gave the executive branch powers too. And part of that is the right to keep confidential communications and certain kinds of work product. And they didn't expect you would run to court right away and try to litigate it, go to the Supreme Court, ask for their permission for one way or the other. They said ambition should counteract ambition. Let the two branches fight it out, as you suggest, using their own powers, and let it work its way through the political process.
Now, we're going to get to the Don Jr. being asked to testify before the Senate Intel Committee in a moment. But I want to ask you, Saul, about this question today. Did the administration waive an executive privilege claim over the Mueller report already? That's what the Democrats were saying. And since they had McGahn testify already, how can you keep him from testifying again? That was
well, they're two different things. They have certainly waived executive privilege with respect to the portions of the Mueller report that have been released to the public. But you got to remember, as John reminded me before the show, Congress doesn't just want the unredacted Mueller report. They want all the background information. They want all the 302s, all the grand jury.
302s, witness interviews.
Witness interviews, grand jury information. So they're asking for something very much in addition. With respect to the question about Don McGahn, you can testify in a proceeding. I, for example, can decide to testify at the grand jury, and if I am later indicted, I can make the decision, you know what, at trial, I'm not going to testify. So it's a different proceeding. So that's my answer.
But can McGahn, can the president prevent McGahn? Let's say McGahn says, I want to testify.
Oh, absolutely.
Can the president prevent McGahn, for the layman out there, from testifying on Capitol Hill? And does that look like the president wants to hide something or protect this executive privilege, deliberative process privilege, whatever we want to call it?
Oh, no, this is actually the very core of executive privilege that's been upheld by the Supreme Court in the Watergate tapes case. The Supreme Court said quite clearly, communications between the president and his top advisors are protected. And in that case, they were might have been protected against the need by the courts to resolve the Watergate tapes case. I think they would definitely be privileged against a request by Congress. And even though McGahn's not working for him anymore, he can still invoke the privilege. Just like if you and I had an attorney and then we don't have that attorney, we fire the attorney, our attorney-client privilege still exists.
I don't know why they ever allowed him to testify in the first place. I kept saying that at the time. You and I were talking about why were they allowing the White House counsel to go up on Capitol Hill and testify during this whole thing. I think that was a huge mistake.
Keep something else in mind, too. U.S. versus Nixon was a prosecutor against the president. This is just the Congress. And as John said, courts typically, when it's Congress versus the president,
stay out of it. It's a political question.
They typically stay out of it.
It's a political question. All right. Late news today broke that the Senate Intel Committee, remember the Republicans still control the Senate, is subpoenaing, not asking, Don Jr. to testify regarding this Trump Tower project in Moscow. Now, John Jr.'s team basically said that they'd already agreed to appear before the committee. He said no problem. So why subpoena him? What's going on here?
I actually don't get it. I used to work in the Senate. I've signed congressional subpoenas.
That's strange. He said, I'll testify.
Yeah, there's no need to subpoena someone who's voluntarily appearing. You would only use a subpoena after someone appears and refuses to answer questions or not produce documents. So I think, like what's going on in the House, but just in a smaller version, people in Congress are starting to overreact.
Rand Paul and Mark Meadows, by the way, are calling out the ranking Republican, Senator Burr, Richard Burr, tonight, saying, what are you doing? It's a curious development. But when I first saw it, I'm like, wait a second, this has to be happening in the House. It can't be happening in the Senate. Strange.
I don't understand it. The only explanation I can have for it, other than if there's some PR reason, which you wouldn't think would be the case with Burr, is that they don't want a situation where he says, I'm going to voluntarily come here, and then he tries to pick and choose what he can answer, and then they have to go do a subpoena. They want to make it clear, I'm just guessing, you're here under our subpoena power.
Yeah, and the interview he did on this show was cited in all the stories about this, and being asked about the Trump Tower project. You cleared up a lot for our viewers tonight. Thank you so much.